really briefly going to talk about the US Census. This is really, really important to me. And this is an opportunity for us to make a political statement and take a political stand as we are getting counted. So thank you for joining me. Totally unplanned as far as the schedule goes, but I've been talking about this. If you don't know, I have an Instagram page. I have a Facebook page, so I'm posting a lot of this information on there. So please feel free to follow that on Instagram under Mexican Excellence _, and I'm also on Facebook, Mexican Excellent _, and I am a co-host to a podcast called Decolonial Zanili. So that's all in my link tree. So check that out. So, okay, so let's talk about the US Census. So as many of you know, every 10 years, the US does this program called the US Census and data collection. So basically what that is basically trying to find out how many people live in the United States per city, per region. This is how they determine how many resources cities get, where to build schools, libraries, who needs funding, who needs more help, distribute resources. So this is a way to kind of keep things equal, right? To try to make sure that people's tax money, people's tax dollars are going to where they are needed the most, according to the data collected on the US Census. So my particular interest in the US Census has to do with identity. I've been working on this for 20 years as far as the Mexican Central American diaspora in the United States. And it's really important that we understand how representation plays a role here. And I'm going to answer, I've been getting this question a lot as far as how do you answer, right, the US Census? So let's take a look at it here. The US Census, let me read from it. This is the official questionnaire for this address. It is quick and easy way to respond, and your answers are protected by law. So our immigration status is protected. They do not ask for your social security number. They do not ask for anything like that. The questions that they ask, and to let you know, I am going to put the link. If you did not get it by mail, you can do it online. You just got to answer the very specific questions. And I will be providing the link in this video. So, and I know that they did extend the deadline for the US Census. So that's really important to know. The deadline has been extended and you can still fill it out. So you can fill it out over the phone, or you can fill it out online, or if you get the actual brochure, you can fill out the brochure. Okay, so to begin, and they do provide it in English and Spanish. So if you flip it over, it's in English and the other way in Spanish. I am going to get into this in Spanish towards the end of the video. But for right now, I want to get into the importance of it as far as our identity. And so it asks, first of all, the full name of the person residing at that address, your gender. It only has male and female for my non-gender binary peoples. And it asks you for your date of birth. And it begins with the question of race. The race question is question 6 and question 7. So question 6, it asks, is this person of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin? That is question 6. It is down there. You see that? Okay. So and then let me read the specifics, right? It says the options are 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 5. There's 5 boxes that you can check off, right? The first box says no, not Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. 2, yes, Mexican, Mexican American, Chicano. 3, yes, Puerto Rican. 4, yes, Cuban. And 5, it says yes, another Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin. Print, for example, Salvadorian, Dominican, Colombian, Guatemalan, Spaniard, Ecuadorian. So I thought it was interesting that it says Spaniard here when that's actually what Hispanic means, right? So you're a Spaniard, but you're also Spanish origin. So again, that's very confusing. And that's in itself a contradiction, right? Because if you're saying that a Hispanic is someone of Spain, and then you can actually write Spaniard down there, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? So my particular way of answering this, I understand the history of Mexico. I understand my history. I'm a historian. I've been studying this for 20 years, and I do not identify as Hispanic or Latina. I have a big problem with that because, again, language does not define who you are. For example, other brown people that speak English, I'm speaking English right now. There's tons of Black and brown people and Asians in the United States that speak English and have English surnames, but yet that doesn't define us as Britannic, right? So my problem with this is that it tries to homogenize, it tries to group us all together. Oh, they speak Spanish, all the same. That is not the truth. So anyway, so my problem is I am not Hispanic or Latina. The languages that I speak and that many of my people speak, we were forced, first of all, to speak these languages through the process of genocide and occupation, where if you study the history, after the destruction of our civilizations, right, we were forced to denounce our culture. Our people were publicly persecuted and executed for practicing indigenous traditions. And even though the language, they couldn't completely forbid it, they did repress it. And it was mandated that they speak Castellano and Spanish and other European languages. Now, my Northern brothers and sisters, right, Native Americans, you also went through this, right? But it was the English-speaking Europeans who did this, and in us, as far as Mexican Central Americans, it was the Spanish-speaking Europeans who did this. So that shows a reflection of the colonization, right? That relationship between the dominant genocidal culture and then ours. So so what I put here, even though it says yes, Mexican American, Chicano, and if you look at me and in my family tree, yes, we are identified as Mexican, but it's still under the category of Hispanic. So if you were to say, so it's asking you, is this person of Hispanic? And then if you say no, right, that's your opportunity to take a stand and say, no, I'm not Hispanic. But a lot of our people, because it is very confusing, we see Mexican and we see Chicano, and we're like, oh yeah, that I am Mexican. But the thing is, we're answering yes to the question, what type of a Hispanic are you? And we're saying, oh, we are this type of Hispanic. We're the Mexican type. We're the Chicano type. We're the Puerto Rican type. Whatever the subcategory is, it's already under the umbrella of Hispanic. And that's what I have a problem with. So my personal... the way that I answered this, I put no. I put no for Hispanic because I am not a Spaniard. So US Census, the people that put this together, we are not Spaniards, right? We are not from Spain. Speaking a language does not make you part of that ethnicity, of that race at all. Just like I'm speaking English, it doesn't make me Britannic. So follow me, okay? So that's what I answered for question number 6. And I will look at the questions in just a little bit. I'm just gonna get through these questions first and talk about how I answered, and then we'll get to the questions right now. So yes, so I put no, I am not Hispanic, right? And then we go to question number 7. Question number 7 says, what is this person's race? It says, mark one or more boxes and print origins. So question 7 is right there, right? It's talking about race. Sorry, it's a little blurry. And this category has 1, 2, 3, 4, and about 2 subcategories. So the options are white. It says print example, German, Irish, English, Italian, Lebanese, Egyptian, etc. 2, it says Black or African American. An example, African American, Jamaican, Haitian, Nigerian, Ethiopian, Somali. 3, American Indian or Alaska Native. Print name of enrolled or principal tribe. For example, Navajo Nation, Blackfeet Tribe, Mayan, Aztec, Native Village of Barrow Inupiat Traditional Government, Nome Eskimo Community, etc. So myself, in particular, I consider myself a native Mexican, right? I don't agree with the colonial government of Mexico. I don't agree with the white supremacist structure that developed that nation as Mexico. But that is where I am from, in the regions that I'm from, primarily of Jalisco. For those of you who know Jalisco, that's actually a Nahuatl name, and that actually comes from Jalisco. So anyway, yes, so the way I answered number 7, right? So let's go to number 7. What race am I? I selected and put an X mark under American Indian. And it's interesting that they put Mayan and Aztec. Now, this has to do with what happened in 2010. In 2010, a lot of us, right, and I include myself in there because I also was one of the people that put in a so-called, Mesoamerican or a southern tribe, right? I remember back then, I put Huichol and Purepecha, which is the Wirarica people from Jalisco. That's a big region from them. And at that time, right, that's what I identify with. That's the region that I come from, which gets me to a very, very important question. A lot of people ask me, well, I don't know what region I'm from. I don't know what native group is there. Am I even indigenous? So let me get this clear, okay? So let me just respond. I put not Hispanic, right? That's what I put. And then I put American Indian. And under American Indian, I wrote the word Nahua, okay? The reason why I wrote Nahua, and that's Nahua right there, right? That's what I had entered, okay? The reason why I put Nahua is because for myself, I know that the regions where I am from, the regions that my family is from, they were in that area predominantly Nahuatl speakers. Nahuatl is the indigenous language, it's the language that's spoken by the most people of Mexico. But I know that in that region, my people did speak Nahuatl, and so that culture then becomes known as the Nahua cultures, right? A Nahua culture is a culture of people that come from a culture that speaks the Nahuatl language. So I put under American Indian, I put Nahua. Nahua is what I put under the affiliation to American Indian. Now, a lot of people, right, this is a great opportunity for you to reclaim who you are, right? There is the region of the indigenous people called the Kashkan. The Kashkan are mainly located in Jalisco, right? Teotaltiche, there's a lot of regions. Kashkan, there's a big Mixteco population here, the Mixteco population. We have our people from Michoacan, who in the majority are Purepecha. And so the list goes on, right? So what happens here is we have to understand that a lot of us as Mexicans and Central Americans, we have been displaced and detribalized, right? And these are some of the names. We have been displaced and detribalized from our original nations, but that doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're just white people. That's not what that means. And it's really, really important to understand, because the process that we went through as indigenous people, we were first invaded, right? And then there's a genocide of 95% of our population. Those of us that survived that process, those of us were then displaced and forced into different locations. There's been history of how some of the Mayan people ended up in Cuba, right? Some of the people of the Mexica ended up in El Salvador, in Cuscatlan, places like that. So it's important to understand that. Because of that process, many of us, unfortunately, lost the traditional connections that we have to those nations and those tribes. But my opinion is that it doesn't mean that we can no longer be indigenous, right? And it's really, really important to say this, because a lot of our people, the national thing about Mexico is, oh, well, we're a brand new race and the Spaniards got here and we're just blended. We're all mestizos now, which is a total fraud. If you study the term mestizo and raza and all that, it's a really racist term. It's a really racist term that promotes the idea of white supremacy. It promotes that the Spanish blood is the purest blood, is the best blood, and anything that came after is it's a sub blood, it's subcategory, subhuman. And so we can get into that, right? But it's important to understand that because a lot of our people are very confused, right? And I see this when I talk to my family members, when I talk to the community. They say, "Well, what are we?" And my understanding, and I'm giving you the perspective from my understanding, from my research, and it's the fact that we do not the 500 years of Spaniards and other Iberian and European invaders on our land, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden we stop existing. That doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're like, oh, we're gone, we're a new race. No, right? We have thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years on this continent. So all of a sudden, the Spanish invasion comes and all of a sudden we're supposed to just disappear and not be who we are. Now, gets me to the next point. Let's talk about why a lot of our people who are of Mexican descent, who are Mexicans living in the United States, why they don't identify, and a lot of them are not aware of this. And so what happens here is that in Mexico, right, the way that they kind of track indigenous histories and indigenous populations in Mexico is even more it minimizes indigenous populations more than it does here on the US Census. So let me talk about that. So in Mexico, if it depends how they're tracking you. In Mexico, you can be 100% full blood in Mexico, but if you don't speak the indigenous language of your region, then you're considered mestizo. So that's very, very fraudulent, and that's a way to statistically kill the indigenous population. So in Mexico, you can be 100% full blood, but if you don't speak your indigenous language, or you are now in the city and you're not in the rural towns where indigenous populations, the majority of them reside in that particular town, then the government makes it seem that you are mestizo. Like, that's it, right? So that's a way that the Mexican government tries to repress and tries to minimize the indigenous population. This is really, really important, which is why many of our parents, many of our grandparents, that's what they were told, that, that you can only be indigenous if you're 100% full blood and you speak the Nahuatl language or the Zapoteco language, and that's how they categorize an indigenous person in Mexico. So that makes sense because the Mexican government is also on this white supremacist agenda to minimize the brown communities of Mexico, because I hope it's not news to you, but this is true, that in Mexico, Mexicans do not govern Mexico. The Spaniards that originally invaded Mexico never left. Right? So the criollo and the system of power and the cabinet of Mexico, that still is there, right? That is still there. So the term mestizo is white supremacist. It comes from that eugenist movement of Mexico. And that didn't just happen in Mexico, okay? It didn't just happen in Mexico. In the 1700s, there was a shift. There was a push to whiten up Latin America. And you guys can look this up. There's history documented on this. It was not a secret. In the 1800s and the 1900s, there's been tons and tons of movements in our home countries, right? This whole thing about Mexico, Central America, and other countries in Latin America to shift over and to try to say that the indigenous population doesn't exist, or is not that much, there's only a few left, because they want us to believe that the continent is no longer an indigenous continent. Which gets me to my next point, right? Gets me to the point here, where we as Mexicans, Central American, the majority of us are indigenous. Yes, there are still Mexicans who are 100% criollos, 100% Spanish blood, 100% come from the actual, viceroy of the Spanish crown. Yes, that still happens in Mexico, and they're very popular in novelas. They're very popular on the newscasts. Like, these are straight up Europeans, like Vicente Fox, who himself acknowledges that he is a criollo. So that's really, really complicated, right? But because we are talking about the US Census, because we are talking about representation, we are talking about taking a stand and taking a position. That is why I'm here today, because I think it's really, really important to be counted and to take a stand against the system that tries to erase us as indigenous people. So again, the way that I answered the US Census is I put no under Hispanic, and I put American Indian, and I identified as Nahua. That's the cultures that I identified with. So some examples here is Nahua, Kashkan, Mixteco, Purepecha. You could put Chichimeca for my people from El Salvador. The Pipil Nicarao were there for our people from Bolivia. There's so much indigenous diversity, indigenous identities that should be celebrated and should be recovered and should be represented. And that thing that's going to send a strong message to the federal government, to the United States government, to let them know we are still here, even though you're trying to suffocate and you're trying to ignore us and you're trying to minimize who we are as a people. We are using this opportunity to let you know who we are, even though the term Latino, the term Hispanic has come from the federal government, trickled down into our communities. The actual power behind that is a marketing scheme. It's a capitalistic scheme. They're trying to really, what they're trying to do is minimize our presence and make it seem like we're all one people just because we speak Spanish. That is not true. That is a lie. Just like all brown people that speak English, we're not all Britannic. We're not all the Britannic community. We need to have Britannic unity. That's a bunch of lies. It's a bunch of bullshit. That is not true. It is a forced identity. It's an umbrella identity that seeks to exploit our demographics. It seeks to exploit our buying power. Because if you've seen the demographics, if you've seen the statistics, we are going to be the majority. Yes, we are going to be the majority. And I'm talking about Mexican, Central American, South American, all of us, right? Those terms came from the process of white supremacy, of genocide. But yes, we are going to be the majority. So my question is, my challenge is, I don't want us to be the majority thinking we're white people. I don't want us to be the majority thinking that we no longer exist, that we're just all dead, and that the terms Hispanic or Latino are terms, and they're not. These are racist terms. They are capitalistic. They are trying to use, it's a marketing tool. I really want you to understand that. The term Hispanic or Latino is a marketing tool to iron away and to make us all a homogenous group that is not represented. So let me look at these comments real quick. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to try to do more live streams. I think this helps having this conversation. If you don't know, I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram page under Mexican Excellence where I post information. I post different articles. I post different aspects of all this. But most importantly, my priority is to inform. My priority is to resist. My priority is to make sure that this information gets decoded and deciphered and decolonized, and the way that we have these conversations. So, okay, here we go. I'm going to look at some of your comments. Thank you for joining me today. I'm trying to read some of them here. Okay, so talk about why the term mestizo is racist. It's definitely racist. If you study the caste system of what do they call New Spain, which was before Mexico became Mexico by the Spaniards, they actually, after they butchered 95% of our population, those of us that survived were categorized into a caste system. The caste system actually reinforced the racial notions of supremacy and civilization. And so in Mexico in particular, it was a way to justify the oppression of the different shades of brown and black in Mexico and all throughout Latin America. So that happens in the 16th, 17th century, and it actually becomes a full-blown ideology in the early 20th century by Jose Vasconcelos. Jose Vasconcelos really nationalized this term of mestizo in his essay called Raza Cósmica. Jose Vasconcelos, the little background behind him, he's an actual criollo from Mexico. Yo, I'm talking mad here. Hold on. Okay, so Jose Vasconcelos wrote an article called La Raza Cósmica. Jose Vasconcelos is a criollo. He is a Spaniard born in Mexico. And the idea behind mestizo to him, right, and this cosmic race, he's saying, oh, you know, we're all one people, we're all just merging cultures. But in that same article and in his writings, he promotes the population control of Black people, of brown people, and even Asians. So he pushed this agenda of population control, but only the only population that he was concerned with was the Black and brown population. He wasn't talking about population control of white. He wasn't talking about population control of Europeans. He was pushing the agenda of population control of Black and brown people in Mexico. And you can read that. I have a lot of work that's been done on that. If you look at my Facebook page, if you look at other videos under my channel, I talk a lot about why I have videos dedicated to deciphering and decoding his book, La Raza Cósmica. And again, that is why the term mestizo is racist. It prioritizes and it glamorizes the whole concept of blood quantum as a white supremacist aspect of civilization, of what is supreme. And it really does, and it gets sophisticated, right? Because this has been in existence since the late, I want to say mid 1700s, early 1800s, that it really became materialized into the culture of Mexico. So that is why the term mestizo is racist. It is pro-white blood. It is trying to track and monitor how people are still civilized according to their blood quantum. And that is something that to this day in Mexico, the language, the culture, if you see the mainstream media, these ideas of whiteness and light color being supreme and being the utmost beauty is still being promoted to this very day. We can watch La Rosa de Guadalupe, we can watch a novela right now, I could turn it on, and it'll show me and push on me these ideas of whiteness as the highest standard of beauty. And we are now in 2020, and these ideas were being created and constructed in the 1600s and the 1700s. But because the system of white supremacy that promotes these ideas to maintain that level of justification of the racial hierarchies that are used at a global scale, that is why we continue seeing it, because it is continuing to thrive and it continues to prosper in our countries. So that's answering that question. I'm sorry, I'm trying to read them all here. Okay, here we go. Could be racist. Okay, so also for the term Latino, and so let's get into that, right? I think it's really important. I think the media tries to normalize the term Latino. They've been doing this since the 70s, but the term Latino, if you break down the term, right? Latin are the Southern Europeans. Latin was the Roman language. We don't even speak Latin, right? We don't even speak Latin today. We speak Spanish, which is an offshoot of that. But we don't speak Latin. We're not Romans. We're not Southern Europeans. And I get plenty of comments on here from people that are Italian, from people that are, Portuguese. And they're like, yeah, you're absolutely right. We are the Latinos. If you go to Italy, if you go to that part of Europe, over there, they're Latino. That's their norm. That's who they are, because culturally, because demographically, that is who they are. It's really absurd that us Mexicans, Chicanos, Salvadorians, Guatemalans, we're all of a sudden we're Latin because we're speaking a Spanish that has been systematically pushed down our people. That's the problem with the term Latin. And even if you add an X to it, Latinx is also, to me, it's still genocidal. It still completely ignores the whole power structure of white supremacy and terminology. So I am not Latina. I am not Latinx. I am for the inclusion of our people. I am for our BIPOTC, LGBTQ community, for our trans community, our two-spirit community. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to adapt a term that is already pro-colonial, pro-white supremacy by adding an X. That to me is furthering the insult of what a Latino is. So, okay, here we go. Reading out some more comments. Learn the language. Yeah, we should learn our language, definitely. And I encourage everyone to learn your native language because I'm speaking like if I'm from England and I'm not from England, right? It's really important. And again, there is power in our language, there's power in identity. So, and let me tell you that even after 5 centuries of invasion and genocide, a lot of us Mexicans, Central Americans, a lot of us still speak a lot of terms that come from the Nahuatl language exist in the way that we speak Spanish, right? And that's crazy to me. That like completely blows my mind, right? So when you say no te agüites, chicote, sacate, dame un popote, mira el papalote, those are not Spanish. Those are Nahuatl. They come from the Nahuatl language. That is beautiful. It is beautiful that after 5 centuries, we can still manage, as colonized as this has been, that we are still speaking variations in words and concepts that come from one of our indigenous languages. So I think that's beautiful. Okay, let's go on here. Sorry, reading comments. Latin American, Mexican. I discovered in the census that if you claim native, you must provide a tribal ID. Absolutely. Mexican tribes are not, we're not recognized. We don't have a tribal affiliation. So ultimate plan is representation. The ultimate plan is to resist against these terms. And basically the census, it goes through its trial and errors. It goes through its tribulations. And like I pointed out earlier, 10 years ago, this was not on the census. 10 years ago, it didn't have Mayan Aztec on there, right? And the fact that it has it now, that shows they get these answers based on what we respond. So they're going to work with whatever we tell them to. If we don't take this opportunity to make a stand and reclaim who we are, then it's not their job. This is our tax money. This is our money, right? And so this is the opportunity that we have in order for them to understand. So what I'm talking about is representation. I'm talking about us using this as an opportunity to reclaim who we are, for us to take a stand and to let them know at a federal level that they need to be more mindful and that they need to think about demographics, because a lot of us are waking up to this. A lot of us are being more critical about how we are being identified. And at the end of the day, what empowers me is that I'm telling them who I am. I'm not going to allow them to tell me who I am. I'm telling them who I am, right? And again, this notion of, oh, well, you don't have a tribal affiliations, or you're not full blood, you're not this, you're not that. Notice how only when it comes to our people, that's when all of a sudden people talk about blood quantum, right? When we're talking about other cultures or races, it's not an issue, right? Jews can say they're Jew, a Black person can say they're Black, and no one's like, well, how much Black do you have? Well, how much percentage of Jewish are you? Well, how much? It's not an issue. It's not a topic of conversation. Notice that it's only when it's us as Mexicans, as Central Americans, when we're talking about reclaiming who we are as an identity, reclaiming who we are as indigenous people, all of a sudden, here comes the blood quantum talk. And it is my understanding, it is my observation that the reason it becomes an issue, the reason it becomes a problem to them, is because we are on our land. And land is power. Identity is connected to the land. So they much rather have us identify with terms from Europe than identify with terms that connect us to this land. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, whatever they try to put on here and however they try to hide our demographic power, we are here, right? And all of us as indigenous people, we're on our land. Yes, right now I'm on the northern side. I'm being hosted by our Tongva brothers and sisters, right? Those of us that are from these regions, but we're not Europeans, right? And it only comes an issue. Blood quantum seems to only matter to people when we're talking about occupation of the land that we are on right now. Right now, this land right now, I'm not sure where you are, but this land that I'm on right now is indigenous. And I myself, as an indigenous woman, come from the other side of this false border, because this border is false. This border is a colonial border that was put on our land, right? Let's remember that, okay? So I'm crossing over here, being hosted by my tongue brothers and sisters, and the identity that I have, that I am ancestrally connected to, that I am connected to in this ancient recognition is my land, right? And so at the end of the day, what I am looking at, what I'm reading, and it's not that someone is consciously thinking this, but the way that white supremacy and racism and Eurocentricity works, it works in systems, it works in institutions. And so these institutions, in their own sophisticated ways, are trying to repress indigenous identity, are trying to repress who we are as an indigenous people. And it's not just happening here in the US. Like I shared earlier, this happens in Mexico, this happens in El Salvador, this happens in Guatemala. All of these colonial governments have been working since they were founded to repress, to dilute, to water down, and to minimize the indigenous population. And like I said, notice that only matters. Blood quantum seems to be a popular topic when it comes to talking about Mexicans being indigenous or Central Americans being indigenous. All of a sudden, people want to talk about blood because we're on our land. And that's the issue, right? No one else gets this whole thing about, oh, are you sure? I don't know. No, right? Because that's who they are, right? But with us, it is they problematize it because they understand the connection, the political repercussions of an indigenous person who is nationally known as Mexican or Central American. The fact that we are being critical about what the government is telling us to call ourselves, and we are taking a stand and we are refusing to use and minimize ourselves under their categories of white supremacy, that's sending a loud message. So ultimately, the person that asked, what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is multifaceted. It's not just one ultimate goal. It has to be, no. The opportunity here is to educate. It's to educate ourselves, to educate the world, to educate our kids, to educate our neighbors. Like, this is a historical moment, right? And those of us that are decolonizing, those of us that are indigenizing, those of us that are trying our best to recover who we are, this is a great opportunity. This is a great opportunity for us to say, even though you have these colonial borders, even though you're trying to categorize us and stuff us into this nice little knit envelope, we refuse, and we're breaking away from that. We are breaking away from the categories of white supremacy. We're breaking away from these Eurocentric labels. And Eurocentric, why Eurocentric? Because Latin is European, because Hispanic is a Spaniard from Europe. These terms that they're using to identify us come from Europe, right? And what we are doing is refusing and rejecting these terms, and instead we're using this as an opportunity to assert who we are, even if we are not exactly 100% connected to our relatives, to our nations, to our states. It is an opportunity. It is an opportunity for us to assert who we are. And if we're talking about not Hispanic, not Latino, well, this is where we get to do that. So let me keep reading some of the comments. Definitely fake borders. These are all fake borders, people. So borders are an ideology. Yes, they're physically built, but they represent an ideology. They represent white supremacy and containment of brown people. Okay, so it says, but not all Latin Americans are down with the idea of calling themselves natives because of the cool factor that has been brainwashed all the time. So first and foremost, not all Latin Americans are Native American, right? I talked about this earlier, right? The Spanish and many other Europeans who originally invaded the Western Hemisphere and all of its diversity, a lot of them haven't left, right? Mexico, the criollos in Mexico, they're still governing Mexico. The criollos from Central America are still governing Central America. So yes, the white elites are still governing our countries. So they shouldn't be calling themselves natives because they're not. And like Vicente Fox was a recent Mexican president, and he acknowledged it. He gave a talk here in LA when he was president, and he said, oh, I feel for my comrades, for my paisanos, I, as a Irish, and I forgot what else he is, he acknowledged that he is a European. And again, this is the Mexican government. this is the Mexican president talking about he relates to Mexicans because he's Irish and understands the challenge. So there is no secret. It is no secret that that the Spaniards who invaded Mexico, they never left. They never left the position, the power structure. They never left the institutions. They still govern. Yeah, even though it's called Mexico, even though Mexico comes from Mexica and it's an indigenous culture, the people that govern Mexico, they still are reinforcing the trajectory of white power, of Europeans and government. That is still a factor. Yes, ever so often you'll see a real indigenous president or a governor or whatever. But by and far, the elites who govern our countries, right? The countries of Mexico, the countries of El Salvador, they're Europeans. They've never left. And even though Mexico had an independence, right? The independence of Mexico, that was not about us. It was never about us. It was about those Spaniards who were trying to gain independence from the Spanish crown, so they no longer had to give tax to the Spanish crown. Does that sound familiar? It should, because that's exactly what happened here in the United States when they were trying to break free from tax payment and all this. And you know that history. I know you know that history. Okay, so it says, what do you do when your obviously dark-skinned parents are uncomfortable with you identifying as Native because they themselves hate? You know what? That's real. Question from Amy Carr says, what do you do when your obviously dark-skinned parents are uncomfortable with you identifying as Native because they themselves hate that they are Native? This is real. These are real conversations. Thank you for your question. That's real. It's real and it's painful. And like I said, this is an opportunity. We're learning this history. We're decolonizing. We're doing our best. And this is an opportunity to reflect, right? Especially our parents. Our parents went through that system in Mexico that does not teach indigenous history, that does not teach indigenous pride. The Mexican education system is very pro-white, pro-European, pro-glamorizing the Spanish invasion of Mexico. They glamorize it, and that all is there. And it's really, really, it's a lie, right? Put it this way. The education system in Mexico is still working with the education system of Spain. They work together. So the ideas of beauty and civilization and culture, it's still very Eurocentric. As far as the conversation with our parents, I know exactly what you're talking about how, our parents, unfortunately, have lived that experience of racism, of self-hate, because the programs on Spanish language television, like La India Maria, like La Escuelita, all of these racist shows that mock being indigenous, that mock being a dark-skinned Mexican, that promote these ideas of colorism, that are really white supremacists. And you know what? I think this is an opportunity to the person that asked this question to sit with our parents in a loving way, in a compassionate way, and ask them, right? To ask that conversation, like, can you tell me what you remember about or what you were told about being indigenous? And they'll tell you, they probably never had this conversation, right? They've never had this moment of their lives to sit and think like, wow, like, you're right. Like, there's a lot of racism. There is a lot of hatred. There's a lot of that culture of colorism of Mexico is real, right? And it does come out. It does come out in our parents, in our grandparents, and it's something that us as a new generation, with respect and with love, I think we really need to sit down and say, you know what, Mom, it's beautiful to be Mexican. It's beautiful to be dark skinned. It's beautiful. And there's a lot of healing that we need to do. There's a lot of healing because colorism affects the psyche. It affects our youth. It affects our family, and it's real. So I think that's a great question. I think it's a great opportunity to sit down and ask them questions about how they feel about this, about what they know about being indigenous, about why they don't like the idea. And this is real. Like I said, if the census is bad here in Mexico, the census is worse because, like I said, I was reading some of the articles of how Mexico tracks indigenous populations, and in Mexico it's even worse because they're trying to minimize, they're trying to ignore, they're trying to make it seem like, oh, ya no hay tantos indígenas, but it's worse. And the psychological effect that colorism has on our communities, on our parents, it's real. It causes really real trauma, real insecurities, low self-esteem. So this is a great opportunity for us to sit with our parents. Amy is responding to this question saying, my grandfather would call others indio in Mexico to make fun of them when he looks exactly like them. I absolutely, I understand. I understand, and if I can share, I lost my grandmother 2 years ago. I love my grandmother. I love my grandmother. I'm always going to love her. But she's a beautiful, dark skinned, Mexican woman. And I remember her telling me growing up, oh, cásate con un güero, cásate con un güerito para mejorar la raza. For those of you who don't know English, my grandmother, I love her, right? But she's not immune to these ideas of colorism. She would tell me, get married to a white man, get married to a white looking man so that we can better the race. This is real, right? These are real conversations that we're having among our community. And my grandmother was not immune, right, to colorism, was not immune to the racism of Mexico, to herself. And that's what we are being taught. That's what we are being taught at home. That's what we're being taught in the public schools of Mexico. And that's what's trickling down our generation, right? Okay, I'm going to read some more comments here. Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading. Okay, Daniel Garcia, my mom is Salvadorian and dad Guatemalan. I've been reading books about Native Americans, especially the Mayans. I know that south of Mexico all the way to Costa Rica was the Mayan Empire. Yes, exactly. And so for those of our people, our Central American brothers and sisters, if you're watching this, my people from El Salvador, from Guatemala, from Honduras, beautiful indigenous cultures in there. So we're not, I know that there's this idea that, oh, there's the Spanish culture, el castellano and all this. No, the populations of the indigenous cultures of Central America are beautiful. And just like Daniel shared with us right now, it is big. The Mayan Empire was vast and it existed for over 1,000 years. So it definitely penetrated a lot of Central America. Beautiful. We're reading some more comments here. Yes. Okay, so I'm reading up here, but thank you for joining me. I'm gonna give it 5 more minutes to talk about this topic. It's really important. Like I said, it's really important for us to have this conversation. If you are educators, if you are parents, if you are grandparents, it's important to be critical about this because this is an opportunity for representation. Because like I said, representation matters. And I am doing this video because I've been getting a lot of questions on my Instagram and on my Facebook about how did I identify on the census. And for those of you who don't know, please follow me on Instagram. I have a lot of posts on there. Feel free to share everything I post on there. You could find me as Mexican Excellence, Mexican_excellence. And I'm also on Facebook and I'm posting videos. I have a lot of videos on this channel where I talk about I'm a historian, right? I research this stuff. So I have tons of videos where I talk about the term raza, the term mestizo, the term why we are indigenous people, how do we help other people, how do we combat racism, how do we combat colorism in our communities. And it's important to talk about it. The most important thing for us to do as a community, or if you're an ally to our community, is to make yourself educated, right? Because all of us have been kept in the dark about this. It's not popular, right? It's not popular to decolonize and to learn who you are. It's not. So we really have a great opportunity here to reclaim who we are. So again, this video was intended to talk about the US Census and how I filled it out. And like I said, even though Mexican is under the category of Hispanic, I do not identify as Hispanic. So I put no under Hispanic because I am not of Spanish descent. And notice how, again, these terms are Eurocentric. Why is it Eurocentric? Because Spanish is from Spain, Latin is Southern Europeans. So these ideas that are being emphasized, these ideas and identities that are being prioritized in how we identify are European based. And, you know, global white supremacy is real and it's impacted the global, community. And so this is an opportunity for us to reclaim who we are, right? This is an opportunity for us to seek political representation at the comfort of our own home, right? Again, this is available on, you could do this over the phone, you could do this with a paper, or you could do this online. And I am gonna link, at the end of this video, I will link the links to the census. It's really, really important that we take the power back. There is power in identity. There is power in how we identify. And after, you know, recovering who we are culturally and through our history, we have to use all tools that we can use to make sure that we resist these notions of white identities. I'm going to read a few more comments before I go here. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to try to do more lives. I think this is a really important topic to speak about. They have extended the deadline for the census, I believe, through summer. So for those of you who still have not done it, you still have time to do it. Again, they do not ask for your legal status. They do not ask for your social security number. They ask for your name, date of birth, and the people that reside at that particular address that you are in now. Okay, here we go, reading some comments here. I'm thanking you for being here. I hope that you take this conversation with your family. I hope that you share resources with them, help them fill it out if possible. Here we go. Okay, I'm trying to get to some more. So thank you. Yes, and people have different opinions, right? Some people are choosing not to participate in the census, and I totally respect that. You know, we all have our different reasons for why we choose or not choose to participate. So that's all on you. But in my particular, it is my opinion that it is important to reclaim ourselves. It is important to represent ourselves. And it is important to tell ourselves and to tell the government who we are. Okay, so we have a question here. It says, channel number 5, I didn't understand the census, but I'm half Native and half Mexican. I claim both Mexican and Native tribe. Yeah, those of you who are, I understand. That's confusing too. Again, my way of answering this is I put, even though there's Mexican, right? Let's get this here. Even though it does say Mexican under question number 6, right? This is page 4 of the census. So even though it does say, you see that? It does say Mexican right there, right? My problem is this right here, question 6. Is this person of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish descent? And then if you say yes, then we are saying yes, we are of Hispanic, Latino descent. But in my case, I have resisted this idea for the last 20 years, and I put no, I am not of Spanish descent. And on to question 7, the race question, I put American Indian, right? So on question 7, right? Question 7, it says, what is this person's race? So if you can see there, right? It has white, black, or American Indian. So I put, under American Indian, I put Nahua, right? And again, that's just one. There's so much diversity in Mexico and the indigenous populations of Mexico, but that's what I put. So those are some of the sample answers that some of my friends and relatives have used. Nahua, Kashkan, Mixteco, Purépecha. There's also Chichimeca, whatever part you're from, that you understand the region, that you know the region well. And again, just because we don't have 100%, affiliation or tribal recognition in our areas, that doesn't rob us from being indigenous, right? And again, we have to understand that the conversation of blood quantum, it's a very colonialist conversation. It's a very race, ideology that comes through white supremacy, because blood quantum is their popular tool. So yes, for those of you who are just tuning in, my name is Citlalli. I am a historian, poet, activist, and I am the person behind Mexican Excellence. I have a Facebook page. I have an Instagram page. I am also a co-host to a podcast called Decolonial Zanili, and you can look at all of that on my link tree that's on the top of my page. Let's look at a few more comments. I'm going to wrap it up. Wow, it's already been 55 minutes. Woo, we are lit. Okay, 5 more minutes so we can make it the hour here. It says, Tyrone says, some don't claim indigenous, they claim whiteness when immigrating to the US because white supremacy made you into, it's true. I think in the year 2000, I'm not sure. Yeah. Anyway, so when I first started looking at this was the late 90s, right? Early 2000s. You're absolutely right. A lot of our people, right? A lot of Mexican, Central American people, an example of this, Antonio Villaraigosa was the mayor for Los Angeles. He is Mexican, right? He's Mexican. He was part of Mecha. He was like an activist when he was in college. He, in an interview with LA Times, he designated himself as white on the US Census. Antonio Villaraigosa, right? He was a Mexican mayor in LA. So that shows you, absolutely right, Tyrone. A lot of our people, right, they feel like, well, I'm in this country. White means that you have power, that you have resources. So I might as well get closer to that, to try to get some of that credit, that race credit. And that's what happens, right? And even and that's a really good topic too, because I have studied how even the term white has expanded, right? The term white in itself, even white people don't know who's white. Like, they've had this debate among themselves. Believe me, like, I've read, and there's a lot of research being done about this, right? Because now even a Jewish person, a Jew is considered white, an Egyptian is considered white. It's right, like the white club has expanded and decreased depending on who's trying to enter the game, right? And it's real. It's a real conversation. So really important, exactly. Even the term white itself is problematic as fuck, because it changes, right? It changes with the year. It changes with the decade. It changes depending on what rights you're trying to fight. For example, during the Chinese Exclusion Act, right? During the Chinese Exclusion Act, we had Chinese people, Chinese citizens, trying to fight and claim that they were white, so that they that law of Chinese exclusion wouldn't affect them. So this is real. So you're right. Even white people don't know, who's white, or who should they allow white, or who's not white. It's real. And most importantly, I need to let you know, a lot of people tell me, oh, you talk about race and, we're all humans and we're all human. I get it. But let me tell you, I didn't invent the concept of race. Our ancestors didn't invent the concept of race. The concept of race was invented by white supremacy, right? They're putting us in their perspective, in their globe. And that's how they're trying to organize humanity, based on the white supremacist scheme and racial logic, right? So this is their game. We didn't invent this. We didn't invent race. We didn't invent biological racism. We didn't invent any of that. We were doing our thing, right? People all over the world, people of color all over the world. We were just doing us. We were doing our own thing. And then all of a sudden, Europeans leave Europe for massive reasons, and they go and sabotage the rest of the world and justify that through these institutions of white supremacy and racial notions of superiority, just to justify and try to keep us in the inferiority statuses that they have us for. That's just real talk. That's real talk. So this is their game. I didn't invent this. I'm trying to correct this, is what I'm trying to do. Okay, so, oh man, we got one more minute, and I'm off. Okay, so I'm gonna now end this conversation. This conversation was about the US Census, why and how I answer to the US Census. Not everyone's gonna agree with this point, and that's fine. Guess what? We're adults. Make up your own mind, right? I'm getting a lot of negative comments on here. Well, they're not really saying them. But yeah, so I'm here to tell you how I identified, how I answered to the census. I'm going to try to do this video in Spanish maybe tomorrow. So stay tuned. And this is it. So stay tuned. Make sure to follow me on Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this video. Make sure to hit the notifications bell so that you can listen to these things that I talk about. I have Instagram, Mexican Excellence. I have a Facebook page, and I am a co-host to a podcast called Decolonial Zanili. All of these items are found in my link tree, and they're all under all my video descriptions, so you can find it there. I'm going to read a few more comments before I go. I thank you for joining me. This is a really important conversation for all of us to talk about, not just, my community, but everyone. Like, race impacts all of us. This is a global community that we're in. And unfortunately, white supremacy has impacted global communities. So we all need to fight for our communities. We all need to fight for representation. This whole idea of the melting pot is a lie. It's not a melting pot. They want to cook us alive and just eat us, our blood and our bones all together. Exploit our economic power, exploit our demographic power. They want to exploit our culture. They love our culture, but don't love us. And I'm sure a lot of my other people of color could relate to that, because that is a common experience that we have as people of color. Okay, so reading some more comments before I let you all go. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's have this conversation. I really hope I made sense to you. And if you have any questions or concerns, make sure to message me. Again, I am on Instagram and Facebook, and all of my link tree is here. I'm reading. Okay, a lot of people have drama with each other from what I see here. All right, y'all. I am signing out. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please share this video. I'm going to try to do one tomorrow in Spanish, because I've been getting this conversation and this question a lot. So everyone, stay safe. Please stay safe. Remember, representation is power. Identity is power. And we're not going to allow our community to be erased. Furthermore, I am a proud indigenous woman who happens to be from the Mexican region of Jalisco. So all my Jalisco people, shout out to you. And everyone, stay beautiful, stay safe, and let's continue fighting in our purpose and doing well for our communities. We're all here together. Thank you, guys. Take care. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Mexican Excellence, Citlalli. Bye. Woo, that was long.